Hello, everyone. I'm Jean-Claude BeyondMystic, and welcome to this episode of Nostradamus and the Vortex of Time. Please join me in welcoming, of course, the one and only Jay Weidner. You can find him at jweidner.com and also here on YouTube at Reality Check. Mr. Weidner, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
Excited to have you on. And of course, my co-host for today's show, Julie from MaisonJupiter.com here on the web and also on YouTube at Maison Jupiter. Julie, welcome back. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How to the both of you? I'm happy to be here discussing interesting stuff with you guys.
We'll get into that in a moment. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us live here today on this interactive show. We'll take your comments and questions as we go along. Julie, why don't we set up the stage here for this particular iteration of the Vortex of Time? Today, we're looking at the death of the dollar, the death of the empire through the eyes of Nostradamus, and perhaps also some of the current events we have now, the remote viewers, and also maybe some webbot analytics. Set that up for the stage, for the audience here.
Yeah, so I came across a couple quatrains where Nostradamus clearly talks about the destruction of this old economy and transitioning into the new one. And I feel like in astrology is also very relevant because we're having Pluto right now shifting to the very last degrees of the sign of Capricorn, which represents top-down structures of power, top-down economy. So we're shifting, we're at the very end of this old model of economy, and Nostradamus saw it very clearly. So he's talking about the end of a lot of currencies that are not based on sound money. He's talking a lot about silver and gold, and also what could be the starting point of this destruction. So very interesting.
Okay. With that said, thank you, Julie. I appreciate that. Of course, a dog's gonna bark. I'm doing my intro here today. Jay, set it up a little bit here for the audience too. You and I have been doing these shows about decoding here some of the changes in our realm. Just situate ourselves here on where we are in this death of the dollar meme. Go ahead. I'll go check out where my dog's barking. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I've got this weird feeling from watching all of the breaking news on FTX and Ukraine and Zelensky as Man of the Year and all of this, and it's like almost and Kanye is part of this too. Mm-hmm. It's like the people that are in charge are making themselves known to us, I think, right now, which I find really fascinating, as if the curtain's being pulled and now they're just like, oh yeah, we're the ones, we've been here all the time, and I think that it's an orchestration. So, and what that orchestration is, I do believe is some kind of, attempt at a totally centralized world government that I hope woefully fails. So, I'm of the mind that it's decentralization that's going on. I'm going to stick with that, no matter how much they try to centralize, because I think their centralization plans are going to run afoul of just human nature itself. So, it's just, we're in a struggle. It's a huge struggle. It's a gigantic struggle. It's been going on for a long time, and it's going to go on for a long time until, we finally prevail. And Nostradamus talks about this a lot in his later quatrains, and we can't fail. That's the difference between us and them. We can't fail, because if we fail, then we're gone. And so, there's a whole different mentality when you're under a threat, a physical threat to your life. You think completely different. I go hiking, and one time a mountain lion walked about 5 feet in front of me across the path. It was a huge male mountain lion. And I stopped there, and for a moment, so many options running through your head that you never had entertained before, like run, throw a rock, act like a monkey, It worked. Acting like a monkey works, by the way. I really hate that. And he ran like crazy when I did it. So, that's what happens now, is that we're at that place where we feel threatened. And so now we're starting to entertain options that we never entertained before. And, so I'm of the ilk now that we really have to close ranks and and really go deep spiritually right now. I think
Mhm.
that's really what has to happen.
Very good. I think I just lost Julie on the screen. I'm not sure if it's.
There she is.
Sorry, I lost my connection. I think
I,
JC too.
I lost my connection at the same time. What the hell?
That's so weird.
You're in Montreal. I'm in Ottawa. We had weird rumblings today too that they would do another one of those emergency broadcast stuff. We saw that in Germany yesterday, I believe. Also, the sirens were running. They were testing the sirens. Okay, I agree with Jay. We're on the cusp of something absolutely weird here. So, anyways, okay, if I lose connection again, Julie, just go on with the show, and I'll try to log back in. Julie, to set the stage here a little bit, let's talk about. Why don't we do the astrology first? Let's look at this Pluto return. You and I have been talking about this all year. In the Astro Woo shows and in the Crypto Woo shows. But for the sake of this conversation here, we understand that the structure of slavery on the planet is part and parcel all organized by the matrix of control of the money system. And the money system is all derived by the US petrodollar. And this is why we are centering our conversation today on the petrodollar and on the US, because when it goes, perhaps so too does everything else, including that control structure upon which it's built. So Julie, let's talk about why the US Pluto return is important here in this conversation. Go ahead.
Yes. So in astrology, Pluto talks about power. First of all, it's the first archetype for power. Also, it talks about economy. It talks about how people gain power. So money, sex, politics, and also secret power. So secret politics, how people behind the scenes are controlling everything that we see on the scene. So this is Pluto in a nutshell. And it started, well, the exact first date was February of this year, February 22. We had the first exact Pluto return, which means Pluto was at the very exact place where it was in 1776 when the United States were declared officially independent. So what that means when you have a Pluto return, it means that it's a death and rebirth of your politics structures, but also your economy. And it falls in the second house of the United States, which is in astrology, finances house. So finances, currencies. So it's very much talking also about the US dollar. So, so we're having this US Pluto return. It was exact the first time in February, and Pluto went retrograde. So it hit another time the exact same spot. And late December, we'll have the third exact Pluto return. So final hit will be end of December. But keep in mind that Pluto is a very, very slow moving planet. So it influences a lot more than just, let's say, a year. So it's a couple years that are influenced by this exact aspect. So, so yeah, I spoke about the house of finances, the currency. And it's going to be, yes, exact, and a third time, December 28th. And this time it's going to conjunct Venus and Mercury. So Mercury is the planet of information, communication. Venus is the planet of money and also currencies in astrology. So we could see a lot of money scandals that are linked to, let's say, the illness that came on the scene in 2020 and all the measures that were took to eradicate it. Also, it could link to corrupted politicians that could be very much seen, let's say, removing the veil. Also, it'd be linked to human trafficking, anything that's connected to sex that's been, let's say, behind the scenes, but also connecting to central banks, which is also Pluto. So with a Pluto return, it's like lifting the veil of anything that's been hidden regarding money, finances, and power linked to the United States, well, also the world, but specifically the United States. So it's a death and rebirth, and it's a very powerful death and rebirth planet, Pluto. So this, I think, is going to shift a lot of stuff. And also because it's at the 27 degrees of Capricorn. So very end of the sign of Capricorn. And as we're moving into 2023 in March, Pluto will change signs. So whenever Pluto changes sign, there's a crisis happening usually in society. So we're going to see the effects, the side effects of this destruction of the pyramidal structures when it leaves Capricorn. So when it enters Aquarius, which is a totally different energy from Capricorn, which is decentralization. Well, there's, let's say, a high-end energy of Aquarius and also a lower one, which can be AI and digital ID and all this stuff. But that's another subject. But let's just say that when it leaves Capricorn, we're going to see what we have to deal with following this destruction of the pyramidal and old structure and governing structures. So yeah, a lot. JC, I think you're muted.
Okay. There's a lot there. So I have 3 slides, guys. You can just go and screenshot that if you want to read that. What was interesting, Jay, let me bring you back on the screen here. You mentioned FTX and this whole fraud coming apart and perhaps giving us clues of how all of these tentacles are interconnected. Here in this caricature, we can see a lot there. Now, is it possible that this is only the beginning and we'll eventually see the results of this unraveling by next March, as Julie was saying? Are we going to see that earlier? What's your thought? Cliff is saying perhaps December 12th, 13th, or the 20th of December here, we have a big emotional spike coming up also. Similar to maybe how it took a month after Watergate was originally exposed for the whole population to realize what was all included with that. Or are we going to wait for maybe March? What are your thoughts?
Well, they are doing a really good job of not reporting it in the mainstream media, which I find fascinating. 7 seconds, I think, CNN spent on the on the whole thing.
Yeah.
So, but the alternative media is covering it like crazy and pointing out, I mean, the ramifications are huge, man, of this thing. People don't know. Right now, there's a huge scandal going on at Disney because Disney purchased a whole bunch of the FTX stuff. And then when Bankman, and it came out about Bankman, what, 3 weeks ago or whatever, that came out on a Friday. And by the end of the weekend, by Sunday night, Bob Chapek, the CEO of Disney, was fired in the middle of the night. And it looks like his CFO, who is the one who purchased all the FTX stock, or the FTX stuff, is now going to be moved into CEO. So there's some kind of major cover-up going on, and this is probably going on all over the place right now because everybody bought into it, and it's clearly a dirty, filthy trick by the powers that be to hurt the crypto markets and take money from people to give that money, launder it, and give it over to other things that they can. People don't realize Bankman financed the fraudulent study that said that horse stuff was not good for you. That was him. He gave $18 million of FTX's money to stop the horse, any good things to be said about it. So once you start looking and unraveling the whole thing, and people are doing that, believe me, you can see how this mafia works. And for some reason, they're letting us see it. And for some reason, they're letting us see them. And this is all very different than it's ever been.
Right.
And, as much as I think, Ye's a real talented guy and all that, I'm sorry, man, he was always in there with them. And so I'm really suspecting that he's some kind of, I don't know what you would call it. There's a term.
Controlled opposition?
Yeah, to release information to the public that they want released. And they want it, is what I'm saying. And so this appears to be the big moment to me. Just looking at the geopolitics, this appears that, right around the time that you're talking about, from late December into February, it looks to me like this is their big moment. I would presume they're going to try their digital currency sometime very soon here. And that's what this is all about too. So, it is, there's a line in Jurassic Park. Jeff Goldblum is hurt. He's laying on the table, and all the dinosaurs are trying to get in, and everybody's screaming and everything. And Jeff Goldblum kind of looks at the camera and goes, "I'm really getting tired of being right about all this." That's how I feel right now. It's like, I wish I was wrong.
Well, we're all vindicated, of course, with this whole laptop thing. I got a strike or got deleted when I mentioned it a while back. Now, of course, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's absolutely true. So yes, we're getting tired of being right of all this stuff. Now, you just mentioned the cryptocurrencies, Jay. Today here on Zero Hedge, Nigeria is limiting ATM withdrawals to $45 per day here to force people to use, instead of cash, their new centralized digital currency. And I showed on my Crypto Woo episode last week that here in Canada and North America right now, we have 12 banks that are rolling out and testing their own CBDC here in North America. And they say it's just a test and they have no plans of implementing it, but we're a couple of weeks away here, perhaps from what we're seeing now here in Nigeria, some type of legislation or mechanism to force us into it. Now, as we see that also, what's interesting is they're creating perhaps this exposure of the fraud of FTX so that the government can say, aha, see, we told you, crypto is bad, use our CBDC. Those are government control, those are safe. And to do that, they need some scapegoats. So you talked about Disney, but this guy here, Kevin O'Leary, once a political contender here in Canada, is in hot water today too for his role. Let's see what he has to say here. He's a little bit under fire in this interview.
I don't think you should be singing the blues right now at all.
Oh yes, I'm singing the blues.
Why? Because your $15 million didn't pay out. That's a lot of money to be a paid spokesperson. It's a lot of money. You didn't have to do much for that. That's found money.
That's a different decision. That's a different discussion.
Yeah, that's a different discussion, Kevin. Yeah, maybe for a court case later on here. So we'll see where that all goes. Okay, this is exciting, and at the same time, we're all tired of being right because we don't want it to be right. But yeah, this is the state of our realm right now. Julie, have I done a good job here with the Pluto return? Did you want to go back to the last slide here of March before we jump into the quatrains? Or
yeah, let's go back to it shortly. And I just want to mention too that at the same time that the US are having their Pluto return, they're having their Neptune opposition. Neptune rules illusions, mainstream media, drugs, pharmaceuticals. So when you're having an opposition, it's also a lifting of the veil. You're being confronted with another, let's say, perspective of your reality. So a lot of those veils are lifting also. Mm-hmm. And I think it's also connected to this Pluto return, which is all about who's behind the scenes controlling everything. And you're seeing also the connection with the pharmaceuticals, with power and the government. So this is all being exposed for us to move into, let's say, a new era to make different choices as a population. Okay. Yeah, I think I wanted to talk about, well, also Aquarius. Pluto is moving into Aquarius for the next 21 years. So we're already kind of seeing this energy unfold because it's in the very last degrees of Capricorn right now, but it's going to be exact in March for 21 years. So Aquarius also has to do with technology, right? So it could also talk about us moving into the cryptos. And as we're moving into the crypto world, because I believe it's our collective future is there, but there's two paths in front of us. So also, there is the CBDC path and there's the decentralized crypto path. So Aquarius talks about technology either way, but it's a choice of whether power is going to be centered around the governments and the illusion of decentralization, or are we going in a real decentralization way? So this is just what I wanted to add before we're moving into the Nostradamus part.
Okay, very good. Jay, anything to add on that, on the Pluto return or the next 21 years? You were nodding your head.
No, I think that's really interesting that the next 20 years it's going to be in Aquarius, because Aquarius is really a pretty important sign. So this could be in for a wild ride now.
I think we're into it now for sure. Okay, Julie, let's start with the first quatrain here for today and how that relates to our economy, the old economy is dying, and perhaps the new one taking form. And again, the revival here of our favorites here on Beyond Mystic, gold and silver. Let's get into that.
Yeah. So I found this one very interesting because to me, it talks about a central event that could be the start for this whole, let's say, destruction of the old. And I feel like we're in it right now as we speak. So let me read that for you. So first line, it says, the great credit of gold and abundance of silver. But as I read the French initial quatrain, it's not as well translated as I would like it to be, because in French it says, wait a minute, I'm just going to read my French part. Okay. Le grand crédit d'or, d'argent, l'abondance. So it says, it talks about credit, it talks about gold, it talks about silver, and then abundance, but it's not linked. Abundance is not linked just with silver, and credit is not just linked with gold. This is what I meant. So it says credit, gold, silver, abundance, basically. So there's a couple theories around this line for me. Maybe it talks about, let's say, Federal Reserve owning a lot of gold and silver, or the central banks owning a lot of gold and silver. And also it could talk about the value of gold versus silver, so not being well represented in our current markets. So I'm wondering what you guys are thinking about this one. Yeah.
Do you want me to jump in quickly?
Yeah,
I
go ahead.
appreciate that, because the translation in French is very different here than most of the
Yeah.
English translations. So what he's really saying here is that there's a great credit to be had here, or a great accounting, if you want to call it that way, for gold and silver once all of this fake paper is exposed to everyone. And he's saying that that leads to abundance. That's how I read it in French, first of all. And when you say here, the Federal Reserve owning gold, they've been the biggest buyer, the central banks, over the last couple of years, of physical gold and also silver to some extent. They've been draining the COMEX here for the last year, and I had Andy Sheckman on the show talking about that. So they are very much front-running something that they know will have a big positive impact on holding physical gold and silver. They're telling everybody else, oh no, these are just pet rocks, don't look over here. Pension funds are good, metals are bad. That's what we hear on the news, but they're doing exactly the contrary. Jay, what are your thoughts on that here before we go too fast?
No, I agree completely with your the version of the French version is much clearer about what's going on. So I agree completely. It's the great credit, which we're in right now, leads to gold and silver, which then leads to abundance. And
Right.
it's just exactly in that order, exactly like he has it. So that's what's going to happen. And, there'll be some Bitcoin in there too, but it's pretty obvious. We're going to have to go back to something that's kind of solid money supply, because it's just not working. And as this unveiling occurs, which I think is going on right now, and we see everybody as the crooks that they are, they better be careful. I'm serious. I don't have a bad temper, so I knew all this stuff already. But for all the normies that are going to hear this, it's going to be, I don't know, they're not going to be very happy if they find out.
I think that's what the program Socrates of Martin Armstrong is picking up, and what Cliff Hyde's picking up in the WebBot data, that there's going to be a lot of vigilantism, maybe justice on the streets, when people really find out the truth of it all. And I think there was a famous quote, one of the probably Bush Senior, who said something to the effect that if the people knew what we were up to, we would all be hanged at the corner light post. Yeah, maybe, probably. What was interesting here, let me just bring it up for the audience members here. We were speculating this on last month's show, maybe 2 months ago. There was a big whale who came in and bought a lot of physical gold on the market, and we were speculating it was China. We just heard news here the last 2 days that it was in fact them, and this kind of leads to what we've been discussing for the last number of years here, that perhaps the renminbi or the yuan would be eventually convertible by gold, or that they would introduce this yuan, this digital yuan that would be gold back into this new world currency, or multipolar world currency system. So it looks like we're on the verge of that, if not this month, maybe in the next couple of months here as we move forward. Okay, Julie, let's go back to this 814 quatrain here. Let's dig in a little bit more. Go ahead.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's exactly what is happening in this quatrain. Nostradamus is describing how the normies are going to learn about the destruction of their federal notes and the non-value of what they thought had value. So it's exactly what he's saying there. So second line, he's saying, the great credit of gold and abundance of silver will cause honor to be blinded by lust. So here he's talking about corruption. So corruption from the higher ups, wanting to keep all the riches and wanting to keep the population in debt. And then third line, the offense of the adulterer will become known. So I find this very, very, very relevant and so interesting, because we're having all those scandals about people in power in the US, especially in politics. You can read the line I wrote underneath. So it talks about there is going to be something that's being, let's say, exposed to the public. So an offense of the adulterer. So I think it pretty much talks about the current US president. And then it leads to which will occur to his great dishonor. So I wrote losing USA's reputation and financial credibility. So certain people are going to argue that United States already lost their reputation with the president in place. But I feel like it's going to be more widely known once people wake up and learn the real state of the affairs, with also the power of their currency that's being close to nothing. And I feel like this is going to be the central point where this worldwide financial crisis unfolds.
And you know what's interesting there, going back to we're tired of being right. Of course, we're right about that thing there. And that leads to many things. Right now, there is a congressional investigation into the Biden family. That was day one after the Republicans took the House. And on top of that, we have another investigation parallel to that into the DOJ and their inputs on not just the election manipulation of covering this story, perhaps also running cover for all the crimes that are to be found here in the laptop itself. Dangerous murky territory for YouTube. But Jay, what are your thoughts on that? Where does that lead here? Because this is not just about money laundering or influence peddling. As you mentioned at the beginning of the show, it might have bigger ramifications as it pertains to maybe trafficking, to drugs, to adrenochrome. All this other stuff is in there. How do you see this unfolding, and how do you tie in this laptop story here, perhaps with what Julie was saying, the great dishonor here coming from Nostradamus?
Yeah, I think I would take a little more general view of that. I think the great dishonoring is going to be that the normies will discover the giant sex ring that's controlling everybody. I think that's about to be unveiled too. And it's going to be very shocking, even though us old timers knew about it all along, right? And I think that's what he's talking about. And that will be their great undoing. There's something. Can we go back to that quatrain again? There was something in there. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
Did you know, oh, by the way, did you know that Stanley Kubrick talks about adrenochrome?
Yeah.
In Eyes Wide Shut?
No,
or
Clockwork Orange.
Clockwork Orange at the bar.
Drug they're taking, adrenochrome. It's called.
Yeah.
It's short for adrenochrome. And and he says, you lace it with adrenochrome. And it's like, okay. So even Kubrick knew about this, and this is where we're going to be going to eventually. We're headed towards it. We're headed towards like what we said, all the things that you think that you hear that you think are true actually are, and they're worse than you think. That's the real point.
And perhaps eventually we'll eventually see what was left on the cutting room floor of this movie, because in that mansion, there's different scenes in different rooms further down, and the further down you go in the rooms, the smaller and smaller the people get. And that's all I'm going to talk about for here.
And the same two guys that are at the party at the beginning are the ones that are waiting for Tom Cruise's daughter at the very end in the Macy's store, at the very end of that hallway, waiting for her.
Big menacing teddy bears.
Yeah, with all the menacing teddy bears around.
Crazy. Jay, you wanted me to point back to this slide? There was something here you wanted to look at?
Yeah, I just wanted to end up.
Jay asked, hold on, Julie. Jay was asking to go back to this slide. Which point?
Yeah, no, I wanted to
dishonoring.
also that the scandal that's breaking out what's the name of that? Balenciaga,
The
something like that.
Balenciaga, yeah.
Yeah, that scandal. That's also part of this,
Right.
because they're just putting it right out in front of us now, where the deniers are having a really difficult time now with making their case that we're just making it all up. So we're not making it up, and it's true. And
Well, just to be clear here, Jay, Snopes, they made a fact check, and they're for sure telling you, no, Balenciaga does not mean Baal, the entity to which we sacrifice children. No, of course not. And of course, it's also spelled Ball, Balenciaga, in the yellow tape in one of their promotional videos. But Snopes is correcting us. It has nothing to do with that, Jay. We can move on.
Yeah, Snopes. I've had my own dealings with Snopes. But Baal was the god for the Phoenicians, right? And it's my contention that the Phoenicians are the rulers of the world. They were the first. Whoever conquered the oceans first wins, right? Because you know where everything is, all the people, where all the good land is, where the mining places are, right? And you keep it all secret, right? And that's what the Phoenicians did. They kept it all secret. And, we don't know how they managed to move those giant blocks that are there at Baalbek and all of these things. So I think that it's the Phoenicians that are at the center of power, and they're starting to let us know. And that Balenciaga thing is the beginning of this weird revelation. I mean, it's so weird what's been going on the last month and a half. I don't know what to make of it all. They're literally telling us everything.
Well, I'm showing pictures here of Baalbek, and that's interesting. You mentioned that too, because I was watching another documentary the other day that were showing some of the pyramids in Antarctica, which completely eclipse anything else we've seen on the planet so far, and also the fact that we used to have a North Pole on our maps, and it's been smudged out here for the last maybe 500 years or so. So what's at the North Pole? And again, leading to what Joe was saying here, the Phoenicians who've been circumnavigating the world have a lot more knowledge than we today have with respect to how our realm really looks like and how it's all built. Fascinating. Okay, Julie, let me go back now. Do you want to go back to the 814?
Yeah, can we go back to the same slide? I just wanted to add something. And super interesting, Jay, that you mentioned everything about Balenciaga and the sex scandals, because he really mentions in his quatrain the word lust and the word adulterer, which a lot of books said, oh, he didn't mean that. He meant something unethical, not necessarily sexually related, but I believe he did. So it's very interesting that you point that out, because this is, I believe too, that's what's going to be exposed with the coming things. And I just wanted to read quickly. It's from the Nostradamus book written by Dolores Cannon, Volume 3. And the person who channels Nostradamus says regarding this quatrain, my first impression was that the President of the United States being caught doing something unethical. Of course, the international monetary system being based on gold and silver is referring to our present time. But it will be even more so in the future when we have these economics breakdowns that are being forecasted by others beside Nostradamus. These monetary breakdowns will result in gold and silver being the only real currency that is acceptable worldwide. It will not be paper, and certainly not copper, lead, nickel, zinc, and other metals. For some reason, it seems the United States kept it balanced as long as the United States was considered an honorable power. But when the president is caught, it seems to throw the monetary system into some kind of mess.
Wow. Wow.
Fascinating.
So it might be the starting point to what we've been seeing for a long time.
And for a lot of psychics also in the last couple of years, they said that the financial system would only change once, I'll say it this way, once the children are freed. We'll just leave it at that. So that opens up again here all the connection to what Jay was saying, to what perhaps Stanley Kubrick was saying in Clockwork Orange about this manufacturing of this substance around the world and how that is very much connected to the power elites. Guys, if you're looking for gold and silver, you can find that here at beyondmystic.net/silver. These are the specials for this week. The 2022 silver maples are back in stock at $625 over spot, and you can also get some backdated maples here at $605 over spot. So that's beyondmystic.net/silver. Julie, next one, 828. Yes. All right, let's do it.
Yes, so it's all related, you'll see. So 828, it says the copies, interestingly enough, copies of gold and silver inflated. So yes, I feel like it's very relevant to our present time. So I think here he's talking about the reserve notes, the Federal Reserve notes, which we refer to as our money. But he's kind of emphasizing here that it has no true value because it's copies and it's being also inflated, so attached with debt. So fake value.
Let me just add there. So yes, of course, the reserve note, which was originally backed by gold, which is not since 1971. But I believe when he says copies of gold and silver here, he's also talking about paper contracts on the COMEX, the LBMA. So all the paper gold and silver contracts, which are absolutely worth nothing and completely rehypothecated, maybe 500, maybe 5,000 to 1, really, when you look at all the scams here over the last couple of years. Go ahead.
And yeah, and also what you just said, JC, I think it also correlates with the last line of the quatrain. All scripts and bonds will be wiped out. So I think you're right about, and derivatives and all that. So second line, he says, the copies in gold and silver inflated, which after the theft were thrown into the lake, meaning US dollar being destroyed, people learning about that we've been stole from all along, and also elites taking their wealth and going escaping this system before it's too late. So we'll see about the Dolores Cannon interpretation after. And third line, at the discovery that all is exhausted and dissipated by the debt. Wow. So people learning that the dollar is actually worth nothing. And last line, all scripts and bonds will be wiped out. And in the book, it also talks about the throwing away of an economy by manipulation. So the explanation for this quatrain in Dolores Cannon's book, the person channeling Nostradamus says, the first picture I get is of the American stock exchange, fall, crash, devastation. But I see this happening more than once in history. It seems that unscrupulous people have infiltrated machinery and manipulated various markets of exchange. It creates a horrible disaster in economy. So many small people are bought out by larger people that the control can be manipulated by very few. So to me, that's very much the Capricorn, Pluto and Capricorn top-down pyramidal structure that is falling apart.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jay, you were nodding your head. Anything you want to add to that as well? And I'm going to bring up a few Twitter.
Well, I just like the way that this quatrain reflects the other one. Can we go back to that quatrain? I don't want to reread.
Yeah, hold on a sec. Sorry, I was setting up the next slide. 828. Yeah, go ahead, Jay.
I mean, that's just about as self-explanatory, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the copies of gold, that's exactly what the reserve note is now. It's just a copy. After the theft, we're thrown into the lake. Once we realize our paper is worthless, we're going to throw it away, which is going to happen, or burn it. At the discovery that all is exhausted and dissipated by the debt, which is exactly right. And then everything's wiped out. I like the idea that scripts and bonds, because that means that their script will be wiped out. So we won't be playing by their theater anymore, it looks like. And I think that is true.
Oh, that's a good way of seeing it.
Yeah.
Julie and I were debating at the beginning of the show, did they mean script like a note, like an IOU, as opposed to a bond, which enslaves you for payments in the future? But scripts as an acting, this big play, that makes a lot of sense too, of course.
It makes so much sense, because I thought about script as being computer language. So I was thinking about CBDCs, but I think, Jay, you're more on point with your explanation, because he used the word as back in the days what it meant, the script. So writing a story.
Manuscript.
Yeah, and just to blow your mind further, I think what Jay's referring to is, for example, the Acts of Parliament. right? They're all acts. We think of them as law and legislation, but they're acts, as in script. So they're all scripted into these acts or plays. Wow. Okay.
Good one. Yeah.
They
Well
are,
done.
and that's what happened when in 1665, the Great Fire of 1666 in London wiped out all the area around the Thames River, and they were able to build the city of London, their banking empire there. And it was done for geographical means because you had to go down the Thames River to get there, so you could have a gauntlet on both sides of the river to protect yourself from any invaders. And so what they did is they combined this corporate banking idea with the theater that they discovered in England, because England at the time was a center of theater, and they realized that they could combine theater with banking and what you would call colonialization, pretty much, and use it all in a kind of a alchemy that will fool everybody into believing your entire play, which is what it is. And
Wow.
Shakespeare said, "The world is a play. You know, we're all actors in it."
You're too fast, Jay. I was trying to bring it up before you said it, but yes, exactly. I love it. Okay, we're thinking alike here. Just to go back to the scripts and the bonds or the papers, the fakery of it all. This was the Bank of International Settlements just the other day on Bloomberg. A huge missing and growing $65 trillion in debt sparks concern. Imagine that. This was Frank Justra here in Canada. So mainstream news talking about basically here you're getting into not just the derivatives, but the derivatives on the derivatives, and then the over-the-counter derivatives that nobody knows about. So there's huge piles of debt and fake promissory notes on top of this very small pyramid here. At the bottom, we have gold and silver at the way smaller bottom. So fascinating stuff. And in our realm right now too, the move here to link gold to oil by Russia here is going to have big ramifications in a very short while. I'll have Andy Scheckman on the show next week to discuss exactly that. And of course, as we were discussing earlier, central banks here started Q4 here of this year, of course, buying more gold than ever. So again, depleting all of the physical from the exchanges around the world. So Nostradamus' timing here is right on point.
And you guys are making me think about what I spoke earlier about the U.S. Pluto return correlating with the Neptune opposition for the U.S. So it's pretty much what Jay was talking about with the scripts. So it's like the propaganda agenda is exposed with the Neptune opposition at the same time as the old pyramidal structure is being destroyed. So when you lose the control of the narrative, you also lose who's in power also. Like your whole scenario falls apart. So I think it talks about that as well.
Well, the whole destruction of the propaganda.
The Hollywood movies, they're not working anymore. And if Hollywood is in a frantic nosedive right now, and they're trying to get out of it, and probably Cameron is going to save them again. Sometimes I wish that guy would go away because he keeps saving Hollywood from their own crapola. But so even that's failing, and they know it, and they're doing the math, and now they're getting rid of all across the board. The studios are getting rid of all of their propaganda that they had, literally losing billions of dollars in doing this. So it's unprecedented.
And we're seeing the big layoffs at CNN again this month here in Canada. All of our broadcasters are dead almost, and they need more government bailouts here to continue operating. So that's on the backdrop of, so that's them dying out of the weight of their own propaganda and people not believing them. But on top of that, we have an offensive move, which is this one here now, taking over the reins here of Twitter and showing all of this old censorship. So this idea that Nostradamus was saying that these scripts would dissolve, well, that only happens when we have free speech. And it appears right now, and this is just the tip of the iceberg here in terms of the people who had been censored. We'll get into the election, perhaps the pedophilia, and all these stuff that are all connected here. So somebody said the other day, Musk didn't buy a social media. He bought a crime scene, and now he's in possession of all of this evidence. And as he says here, this is just part one of many to move forward. So Fascinating times indeed. Okay, incredible. Julie, anything else on 828 before we move to the
No,
next slide?
we can move to the next slide.
Okay. And Susan says, Julie is rocking the decipher process. Thank you, JC and Julie. And of course, thank you,
Thank you,
Jay, for
Susan.
joining us here today. And guys, of course, if you want to find Julie, you can find her at Maison Jupiter here on YouTube. So please go like and subscribe there so you can find all of her amazing videos. And you can find Jay also with his amazing content at Reality Check here on YouTube. So please do go and subscribe there as well. I love your new poster here of the alchemy on your top banner, Jay. That's really cool. Okay, Julie, next slide. This one here is 733. Go ahead.
Okay, so here I'm pretty sure, well, he talks about the United States, and also this is what Dolores Cannon in her book was saying about this quatrain. So it goes, the kingdom stripped of its forces by fraud. So I believe here he's referring to an economic fraud, but also political fraud because of this event that just happened recently. Also, the fleet blockaded passages for the spy. So to me, it refers of outside influences in U.S. politics. So this spy, let's say archetype. Also, he says 2 false friends will come to rally. So is he talking about a US-Russia alliance or something like that? We'll see. And then to awaken hatred for a long time dormant. So, and in the paragraph that I'm about to read, he says that they're leaving the Cold War behind to form a new alliance moving forward to, let's say, go against the deep, am I allowed to say that word? I don't know. The deep S.
Okay.
Okay. Ooh, this is hard. Okay, so let me read that. So the person channeling again, Nostradamus says, he says it still refers to America and that the years to come, the next decade or so, we will see increasing restlessness in the United States. He says the system of government will become increasingly top-heavy, spending too much money, and it will ruin the economy. Sweeping changes will need to be made or it will fall from its own weight. He says that America itself will survive, that the people in power will be broken down. Pluto and Capricorn. The change will be needed, and if it goes as it should, the change will be for the good. Because as the government gets increasingly top-heavy, it continues to infringe upon the rights of the people. But when the old structure is broken down and the new structure built up that is more equitable and more in balance, the people will be restored to their freedom. Yes.
Very good. Jay, how do you tie in this with perhaps what we saw in the news again the other day, this idea of declassifying perhaps the rest of the documentation in the JFK assassination, the Warren Commission, documents that we still haven't seen, and in earnest, going back to these two alliances, JFK wanted to work collaboratively with Russia on the ET file, and he was removed from the equation, and we've had what's ensued. How do you tie that in, the assassination of JFK, and perhaps once this changeover happens, perhaps that reunification there of Russia and the US working in collaboration? How do you see that happening?
Well, I don't know about that. Let's go back to the slide again. I want to tell you what I think.
Let me bring it back up. There you go.
Okay. Well, clearly that's the kingdom stripped by its forces by fraud. That's us. That's the normies waking up. The fleet blockaded passages for the spy. I think that is talking about the idea that we let someone into the gates, inside the gates, and that that person is that group is against our interests. Okay, and the 2 false friends will come to rally. I would say, I'm not going to name the 2 countries I think they are, but there are 2 countries that are associated that we have that are our allies, but constantly stab us in the back, and they are absolutely against us. One of them's in the Middle East, and another one's in Europe. Okay, and then to awaken hatred for a long time dormant. That is the normies. Hatred has been dormant for a long time, and it's about to awaken. And when and all the passages above are referring to exactly what they're waking up to. They're waking up to the spies inside the gate and the false friends who pretend to be our friends. And we're going to see the whole thing come apart. And it has to do with Bankman and Ukraine and Biden. And they're all intertwined in a gigantic mafia thing that's been there for a long time, and it's now being exposed. That's why they're rushing so fast to make Zelensky the man of the year, and the propaganda is now so obvious to everybody that you almost start laughing when you see it. So I think this is a really good description about what's about to happen.
So basically, they're waking up to the fact that the enemy is not outside your country; it's in your country.
That's right. That's exactly what's going on right now. And it's almost, if this current events are not being orchestrated, and they may not be, if this is a natural grassroots flowering of knowledge that's been going on the last few weeks, with the basketball player getting fined for saying something, and if this is a natural flowering, and it could be, then they better be worried, because it'll spread really fast. And we've seen the consequences in history of this.
Of course, Zelensky, the person of the year award. I have to bring it up for you guys. No, we're not kidding.
I need to get my vomit bucket.
Right, exactly. Going back to JFK, I still have it in my mind that there's a connection here, because when Cliff High talks about this SOC, this self-organizing collective, what people call the White Hats, we are apparently approaching this time where we're going to see the hand of it more publicly than we've seen perhaps since the death of JFK, which could have colluded or instigated this SOC, the creation of this SOC. And they've been working behind the scenes all of this time to do exactly what you guys are describing here, fight the enemy within, because we were invaded at that point.
Okay. Go back to that slide one more time, because you're on a point I want to emphasize.
Okay, the 7. Okay, let me go back. Yeah.
Okay. The fleet blockaded passages for the spy, right? Okay, so the White Hats are the Navy, all right? So the U.S. Navy was the first intelligence agency in the United States. John Paul Jones created it. And it's basically to stop people from bringing goods in without paying tariffs, right? And that's how the United States functioned all the way up until the income tax in 1913 was for tariffs. The tariffs paid for the government. So it was really a pretty good system. So anyway, so what happened is that Kennedy was naval intelligence. He ran a U-2 boat. Right. And the other president that was naval intelligence, of course, was Jimmy Carter. OK, so what we have is we know that the naval intelligence are the good guys. They're the White Hats. And we also know that the Navy runs NASA. It's very important to understand that. And Navy is the not anymore. They did, but now the Space Force runs NASA. But it was the Navy. So all of the stuff going on in outer space and all of the stuff going on in the seas and everything was all being done by the Navy. And so the group that the fleet was blockading got through. Okay, the Navy was blockading this group for years, for decades, and it got through right after World War II. Okay, then the creation of the Central Intelligence Agency superseded the naval intelligence, which really pissed off the naval intelligence people, because they were at the height of the hierarchy and they didn't want to be superseded. So a war began between U.S. intelligence agencies, CIA and naval intelligence. To this day, it's been going on. Carter was naval intelligence. He got into office. He put in Stansfield Turner, who was the head of U.S. naval intelligence, to be the head of the CIA, to which he promptly fired about 40,000 guys that were, he said traitors, basically. He didn't use that word, and which created it was called the Halloween Night Massacre. He fired them all on October 31st, 1978. And then all of a sudden, all these covert groups began appearing all over the place, doing all sorts of stuff that weren't related to the United States. It was They were independent covert groups doing the Iran-Contra thing and doing running guns in Nicaragua and cocaine. And these are all these people who had been fired, who then created these really dark, covert groups that are still running around right now, selling drugs to the inner cities and all of that. So I interpret that as, the fleet, the Navy intelligence got superseded, and they are fighting back again. And I don't know. I know they don't like Biden. I mean, I can't tell you any much more than that.
Well, let's talk about that for a second here too. Like when he was inaugurated, so a lot of people in the military are doing decodes that it wasn't the right uniforms there present at the time. It wasn't the right songs. Also, it was more like a funeral than an inauguration. And also, he didn't fly in on Air Force One. And also, the White House had admitted this at the time, and we haven't heard about it yet since in the mainstream news. But the military refused to give the Presidency the nuclear football. So that suggests to me that this, yes, perhaps the naval intelligence got superseded here by all of these other groups, but I think they've grown in such a force now where perhaps they're really in control of the country, where they're leaving right now maybe the Presidency in control of the failing, dying corporation of the United States. That seems to be the picture that is being painted now. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, so we know from Reality Winner. Remember Reality Winner, the girl that copied all the stuff on the printer in the U.S. government and passed it out to the press, and then she got arrested. The way they found her was that each paper had an invisible watermark, telling you exactly what printer it was printed on, what time was printed, all that. Every vote probably has a watermark on it, okay? And that means that the NSA can track everybody, all the votes. So, and it would be in their interest to do that, right? So that big facility out in Utah. And so I think that they're letting, you cannot arrest someone for a crime before they commit it. So they're letting crimes be committed, and they're collating them and putting them in some kind of order for eventually to do something about it. That's what I think is going on.
Mm-hmm. And that's perhaps why they keep increasing the barracks at Guantanamo Bay. So they're not shutting it down by any stretch of the means here. Jay, just because you talked about the Navy, I wanted to bring this up to you. This was a couple of days ago. U.S. nuclear submarine buzzed by underwater object traveling faster than the speed of sound.
Through water, that's amazing.
Yeah. Cliff High was talking about this a couple of years ago. He said, this is old news really from his circles. Some of his friends in the military had told him about this. They call them fast walkers. And he says, why don't they talk them fast swimmers? But anyways, yeah, it's funny that it's in the news now. And
well, you see, my theory is that the Phoenicians have a place that we don't know about somewhere on Earth. Yeah. Okay, and they live there. They found it centuries ago. Yeah. And they have the underwater machines and even cities under the water. And they control the Navy, the most powerful navies on Earth. Mm-hmm. That's their goal. And that's the U.S. Navy. So the U.S. Navy is directly controlled by this group. And I believe that the bad guys that have got inside the gate are about to be exposed. And I think that's what's going on.
Do you think the movie in Hollywood, while I got you on the subject here, Aquaman, is that referring to perhaps the civilization of the Phoenicians underwater somewhere?
Yeah, I think so. I think that they're seriously advanced a civilization. It's been here for a while. They're the ones that Graham Hancock is talking about in his recent Netflix documentary of going from place to place, showing people how to grow food and how to respect women and all these weird things that you think, why are they doing that? Well, it's because they're trying to take us out of, because we're sliding back into monkeyhood essentially, and and savagery, and they're trying to take us back. And I think that's who they are. And I think Quetzalcoatl was one of them. They're in South America, and they're all around, and I think that they got really concerned when Fukushima happened. And I think that they looked at Fukushima as being so damn dumb that you would do that, that they decided that they had to start intervening. And I think that they've been, since 2011, really coming in and grasping the controls very firmly because they see their own demise.
Yeah. Melissa says, fascinating show. Thank you, Melissa. Appreciate that. And another fascinating show. Yes, this documentary Jay's just talking about now. Perhaps we can invite Graham here on the show. It would be absolutely cool. But I watched, Sarah and I watched the whole thing in like a day and a half. We saw all of the episodes here. Really, really good. We met Graham, Sarah and I, 2-3 years ago. When he launched the book America Before, and he had this book signing thing in Montreal. Fascinating research.
Yeah, he's a little friend of mine. I've known Graham for about 25 years now. And there was a little bit of history here. That show was going to be taken by Gaia, by the way. It would have been our masterpiece. It would have been our flagship show. And I don't know exactly what happened. I wasn't there. They would have never slipped away if I'd been there. I guarantee you that. So somehow it slipped away and he went to Netflix.
Well, if you're in for it, I'll invite him on the show. We'll do a special show just on this, and maybe look at America Before, but also at this documentary and focus the audience.
Oh, he is taking some crap on that documentary.
Yes,
for sure.
I'd love to have his take on it here for the audience too, because the mainstream media is really beating it up quite bad.
Oh, and what they're doing is they're drilling down on one thing, right? And what they do is they skew it, so it's not exactly what Graham said. It's just sort of what Graham said, and then they skew down on that. Well, that means everything else is impossible and nothing can really be true. And
they do that all the time. It's the same thing with the documentary Died Suddenly. There's one guy who didn't actually die, who fell into basketball. Everybody said, "Oh, see, that's fake. The whole movie's fake." Okay. They always do this. This is their tactic. Okay, Julie, we had one slide left. We're already at the hour mark. 2:44. Let's get into this one.
Okay, so he says, yes, exactly. The eagle driven back around the tent. So the eagle, I'm pretty sure, refers to the United States. And then in the decode by Dolores Cannon, it said that USA are going to lose some battles against the Big C. So the eagle driven back around the tents will be chased by other birds around him. So I'm curious to see what Jay you have to say about this after. But maybe it refers to having enemies all around, maybe something I didn't think of. And then third line, when the sound of cymbals, trumpets, and bells. So it's kind of the signal for victory, I feel, against this one world government, will restore sense to the senseless woman. So here I believe he's talking about the Statue of Liberty that will be back into her full power and symbology of freedom, of true freedom this time. So let me read the text below. So he says this refers to some of the defeats the United States will suffer while fighting against the Antichrist. And if you remember last show, we've been talking about the Antichrist as being more of an energy that those certain groups would use to build this one world government against the people. He says it also refers to the deterioration of the political situation inside the United States before and during the times of troubles. But after the time of troubles are over, people are celebrating their victory and their freedom. This celebration will reawaken in the United States the concept that is embodied in the Statue of Liberty. The concept of liberty and rights and such, which have been dead because of the situation of war and the Antichrist, they will come back alive. People will have their rights again and things will be better than they were before. And I also believe that in order to really be able to savor the full value of freedom, you first have to see that your freedom have been taken away from you in the past year. So I believe it also served a big purpose in people understanding they're not free. JC, you're muted.
Jay, go ahead.
Yeah, can I go back to that again?
Yes, please do.
Definitely, the eagle is the United States, and the birds are the other countries that are going to pick away at it. It's death by 1,000 cuts, it looks like. And then, but I think the sound of cymbals, trumpets, and bells. Well, trumpets are generally associated with the tarot card,
The judgment.
judgment. Yeah. So I think that's judgment. And
Mm.
the United States looks like it's about to go through hell. But again, typical Nostradamus, at the end, we're going to come back. And I think it is the Statue of Liberty that you're talking about, because she has become a senseless woman now. Where she stood for something before, she does not stand for anything now. And hopefully that will be returned. And so I think that's what this is. This is the very end of where we're going here. And unfortunately for the rest of the world, when the United States falls, you're going to fall too. And it's going to be quite sad. But it looks like it's going to be violent with the chase by the other birds. So,
is it possible the eagle going around the tent, that's the closure of the 800 or 900 or so USA military bases around the world, where it constricts back to the United States and concentrates their power here as opposed to extending it outwards? Do you see that also? It wasn't a Webbot data report.
No, it does look like that, and that is what's going on.
Yeah.
People
in
don't realize
reports, there was a... Oh, sorry, there was lag. I didn't mean to speak over you, AJ. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that people don't realize that the globalism is over. I'm not saying it for me. The people that were globalists are saying it. It's done. We're done. We're bringing home the semiconductor factories back to the United States, or we're closing down our international presence on the water now. You can see by how we're switching from destroyers to aircraft carriers that we don't really have any intention of racing down anything or protecting borders for China and all of that. Because the thing that makes the world what it's been for the past 70 years is the U.S. Navy. They guarantee their free passage for everybody. And so everybody got free passage without the fear of pirates and all the rest. And so goods and services were able to go across, borders and oceans and everything free. And that's ending. The whole thing is ending. And yeah, the United States is pulling that back. And then that's going to be looking at a sign of weakness, which is going to cause the other birds to come peck the eagle because they think it's going to be dead. And then the trumpets are going to blow. And we'll be probably back in the age, fully into the age of Aquarius by the time this thing fully ends.
Wow.
And interestingly enough, to me, the Judgment card and tarot can also talk about this Pluto energy of death and rebirth, because it talks about resurrection. So the U.S. Pluto return makes a lot of sense there.
It really does. And of course, the card after Judgment is the world. So, it's the positive sign that happens after the destruction. So, yeah, there it is. Just like the mural at Denver Airport with the 3 people in the caskets, only they're dead.
Right. There's another thing with the trumpets also. So first, we talked about the military bases. I wanted to bring this one up also for the audience members. Cliff High, in one of the Webbot data reports, you can get them for free here. He has given us the original unabridged versions. You can download the zip files here and look at those. But he had this report where military personnel around the world would be begging for money in local currencies because of the death of the dollar, and they couldn't come back home. So they would have to beg for money to find flights to come back to the United States. That hasn't really occurred yet, although we're seeing signs that could be very close here in some of these temporal markers of his. So go check that out. That was fascinating. And then going back to the trumpets, what's also interesting in all of that is, of course, Mr. Trump. So the trumpets of Mr. Trump in all of this, and perhaps his return. In my interview here with Juan Osaven last week, we talked about this case that is going before the Supreme Court of the United States. Apparently, the hearing now will be on January 6th. And this is for the 4 Brunson brothers that have put this case forward. And of course, they are 4 trumpeters. They were on Johnny Carson in the late 80s. So it's just fascinating, these trumpets, the Tower card moments, the Trump itself, and the tarot deck of the Illuminati also seems to be pointing to this particular time that we're in now. So any other thoughts on the trumpets there, Jay, before we go to the next topic?
No, but it is so weird. I mean, the Trump the books written in the late 1890s about, Baron Trump going around the world and doing time travel and working with the Russians, and that's not just it. There's other stuff. There's a TV show from the 50s I managed to see, which is a Western, where a sorcerer comes into an old West town, and his name is Trump, and he wants to build a wall around the town to protect them from evil.
Oh, wow.
A big, beautiful wall. I love it. And yes, guys, go look at this time traveling Trump here. We talked about this in the John Teeter decode that Joe, Jason for myself, and Penny Kelly did a couple of weeks ago on YouTube. It was a fascinating episode to see how all of this ties in, and perhaps also to Trump's uncle, who was at the office of
Tesla.
Yeah, but just what was the government office called?
Oh,
The Office of Alien Affairs or something like that, or Alien Property or Alien Affairs. And they were, of course, in charge of taking a lot of Tesla's documentation after he died. So, like, fascinating stuff there as well.
It is. And that same author, Inglewood, or whatever his name is, he also wrote a book, The Last President, which sounds a lot like the last 2 years of Trump's presidency, I got to tell you.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Okay, Jay, I'll come back to you here in a minute here for your last thoughts and words of wisdom on how to navigate all these crazy energies. Julie, same for you here. Any other thoughts on Nostradamus, where we're at now? Oh, I wanted to bring this up. Actually, wait, before we do this segment, we're at number 10. Okay, I still have a little bit of time here. This remote viewing here by Dick Algeyer, this was the death of the dollar slide. And it appears that we could be getting close to that now when we look at the SCOTUS case that is before us here for January 6th. It could also have something to do with the Hunter Biden laptop, all the connections in that, people being discovered and all that. I've made a few videos and interviews with Dick Algeyer already, but I will be having him back on the show here with Jason 4 to discuss specifically that. Jay, do you see this last adjourning of power coming from perhaps the FTX debacle, perhaps from the Hunter Biden laptop, or perhaps from some type of weird loaded weapon here at the Supreme Court of the United States? Or is there maybe more godly interventions or maybe off-world interventions that lead to this? If you were to bet, if you were a betting man, where would you pick that on?
Right now, I put my money on Musk and Twitter. That he's got a lot of stuff in there, and he's going to release it, and it's just going to be overwhelming. It's going to be one wave after another, and the way he's maneuvering, getting rid of Baker as the head lead counsel of Twitter. He's getting ready to because he actually has a lawsuit against the United States. To be honest with you. He has a lawsuit against the federal government for, really, he bought a company that was completely tainted, and now he knows it. So you're right. He bought a crime scene, and he's determined to get it out. I don't know. I mean, we could do a whole show on that guy, to be honest with you.
Well, we could probably look at some of the older Nostradamus prophecies too, and look at some of the characters and see if there's character traits here.
That Werner von Braun wrote a book about the moon with a guy named Musk. That was the first guy to go to Mars. The first guy to go to Mars was a guy named Musk.
Wow.
Interesting. Oh my God. Okay. Julie, first of all, thank you so much again for all of the research here for the show here today. People who are interested in perhaps getting their birth charts done and getting a little bit more of a handle on this astrology, what do you have for them here on maisonjupiter.com?
Yeah, so we have the personalized birth chart, which is basically an art print of your natal chart. So it's a digital product. It comes also with a 15 to 20 pages report explaining your personal alignment. So this is basically a blueprint of, let's say, the strengths and challenges you'll have in your life. And I feel like it's a great tool, especially in this period of big transformation and spiritual growth that we're in. So great tool to learn about your birth chart. And I
speaking
just
of
wanted.
spiritual growth, hold on, Julie, a second.
Sorry.
Speaking of spiritual growth, of course, we just put together this amazing workshop here on finding
Right.
your psychic superpowers by decoding your moon sign and how you can jump or up level here. Speak about this workshop available now on BeyondMystic.academy.
That was a great workshop. I had a lot of fun. And I think we uncovered a lot of truths about the moon. And yes, I believe it's artificial, but I still believe it has a lot of strength in your personal growth from the shadow work you'll have to do in this lifetime, but also your greatest psychic gifts you can unlock from knowing about your moon sign. So we went in length about all the 12 signs and a big introduction with Janine, with the cards. Great self-growth tool, I found.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And you had the last thought, Julie?
Yeah, on what Jay said about Twitter and Musk, I'm thinking in astrology terms. So I'm thinking about this Mars retrograde we're having in Gemini right now. So Mars is staying 7 months in the sign of Gemini, which is social media, communication. And Mars retrograde is also about changing the way things were, let's say, set in the world regarding social media. It's also a warrior planet. So it's actually using this weapon of information and transforming it. And Mars is going to turn direct mid-January, and a couple of other planets are going to turn direct as well. So I feel like mid-January, regarding also truth bombs, Twitter, social medias, I feel like it's going to be a very important moment for humanity. Mid-January.
What was interesting, well, I appreciate that. And what was interesting too, if you guys go check out Cliff High on Twitter, he had this video, I forget, a couple of ones back. I think Macron as a stooge was the one, but it could be, oh no, actually it was Destruction of the Past, I believe it was. He was saying that we are going to be faced here with information so shocking, so difficult, that at the moment it hits your head, you'll immediately have to go to the bathroom, or words to that effect. So we're all churning all of these emotions here and viscerally experiencing all of this data that's coming in and what Cliff was describing as the big ugly. On the last words of wisdom here, Jay, how do you manage that? And how would you recommend the audience managing these times that we're in now and this big unveiling here of the big ugly?
Like I say, find your tribe. It's really important to find people in your community who think like you and that you can help and they can help you, because there's not anybody that's going to be able to help us. Where the great decentralization is really upon us, and they're playing the piper at a funeral. To be honest with you, that's what I think. And I think once it falls apart, it's just going to go. It's like, I think that's what the normies. It's going to be a cascading series of events that are really going to be dealing with corruption and the dollar. That's where this is going to be going. And it's going to be so shocking when we really find out how much wasted money is going to buy people off. They're all bought off. That's all I can say. I have inside information that every single politician who lasts more than 3 years and every single judge and appointee who lasts more than 3 years is receiving gobs and gobs of free money. That's an absolute truth. That's what we have to stop.
Yeah. Totally agree. I was going to stop you there for a second. So I'm like, oh shit, we're going to lose the channel if he goes too far.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you, Jay. Jay, of course, we can find your work here as a hub on jweidner.com. And folks, if you want to see more of his videos, Reality Check is where you can find him on YouTube. Please go and subscribe. What's coming up here, Jay? Any specific interviews you want to share with the audience members here?
Yeah, I just did an interview with Robert Temple, author of The Serious Mystery. He has a new book out about the bioplasmic universe, and it's fascinating. And the last 25 minutes, we spend him reminiscing about the 2 years that he spent on the set of 2001: A Space Odyssey, in which he talks about knowing Stanley Kubrick and hanging out with Arthur C. Clarke, and we're in talks right now where we're going to bring together a whole bunch of the people who are now in their late 70s who were young at the time working on 2001. We're going to do a roundtable, and by the way, I mean, he was like confirming almost everything I was saying. He said the sets were completely locked off. There were signs that said you will be killed if you go beyond this point, right? And I mean, literally, he said that it was just like being in a military zone in the shoot of 2001: Space Odyssey, proving what I've been saying all along, that there was a lot more going on in that shoot than we ever knew.
Wow.
Oh,
I
and by
really
the way, oh, sorry, Jason.
go ahead, Julie. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I watched your series, Jay, the 2001 Space Odyssey, Eyes Wide Shut, like the series you did on Kubrick with JC. And I learned so much about this movie, especially the moon landing. And so I recommend everyone you watch it, because it's truly great. It awakened a lot of new information into my brain.
Well, there you go, guys. Thank you for that. Julie, go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, he was from my talk with Temple, my private talks with him, he would have been one of us. I mean, he was that kind of guy. He was into all of this weird stuff and always asking strange and odd questions, like, this is the 60s. You can't find out anything, right? No. So I think he would have been one of us. And then after talking to him at length, I really realized that Kubrick probably was a critic of the bad guys. He may have brushed shoulders with them, but I don't think he liked them. And I think we can see that from the clues that he let in his films.
Really cool, guys. You can find the series, of course, on BeyondMystic.net. You can get the episodes on pay-per-view one by one if you want to try them, or you can get the whole series as well as a bundle, and you can save 10%.
You know what would be interesting is to do a show where we take all 13 of his films in order, and I can show you how it's really just chapters of a long book.
Of a long story. Yeah. Oh, I'm totally in for that. That'd be really cool. And also, Jay, I wanted to recommend to the audience that they go watch your episode with Brad Olson here, regards to his last book here, Beyond Esoteric. You guys went into a lot of cool topics, and I'd love to get Brad on the show here also. But really, guys, go check out Reality Check here on YouTube and find the interview with Brad Olson and Jay Weidner. Really, really good job. So you can do that here on Reality Check on YouTube. And of course, you can always find Jay at jweidner.com. Guys, join us this afternoon here at 4 o'clock Eastern. I'll have the Jean-Claude and Janine Rumble show starting at 4, yes, Eastern today. And later this evening, join us at 8 o'clock for this Beyond Crypto Roundtable with Mr. Bixweir, Litecoin Lisa, and Jason Ip4. We're going to get into a little bit more of this FTX debacle and these new gold back standards we're hearing rumbling for around the world, as well as the push for the CBDC. So we'll try to help you navigate this new crazy financial system that is taking place. I love you guys. Thank you so much for being here on this latest edition of the Nostradamus and the Vortex of Time. We'll see you again. Jay, stay on the screen here for the next second. We'll try to book the next episode here with you for perhaps the first week of January. But folks, please stay tuned and like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon. Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.